I was curious to know what everyone sees in this game, because it's got plenty of prestigious accolades from respectable outlets, and is also positively rated by users on Steam. I'm usually a good group thinker that falls in line with everyone else, but I'm sad to say I didn't enjoy Harold Halibut. You can't talk about Harold Halibut without appreciating the extraordinary amount of time and effort that went into making it. It's brought to life by claymation, meaning all of the character models are handmade and hand-animated. It is an incredible, time-intensive labour of love. The sci-fi backstory is quite novel and creative too. Due to disaster, Earth rapidly became uninhabitable, and so humans created a giant spaceship named the Fedora. They launched the hat-titled ship to the stars to find a new home. But on the way, something happened, and the ship crashed into the depths of an alien ocean where it lies now. It's been about 30 years since the ship crashed, but far from perishing in this hostile environment, humans seem to have just gone about their lives as usual. They shop, they eat at cute cafes, they go to school. It's all business as usual, except at the bottom of the ocean on an alien planet. I even liked Harold, who is fairly unique as video game characters go. He's shy, introverted, preferring his own company to that of the other ship inhabitants, who he can find a little overwhelming, with all their questions and their talking. What's more, no one seems to really understand him either. At best, they tolerate him with bemusement, and at worst, they just outright bully him with verbal abuse. The one ray of light in his life is a motherly figure, Professor Moreau, who treats him with kindness and understanding. It's implied, but never explicitly stated, that Harold might be on the spectrum, and I'm all for featuring a greater range of game protagonists beyond the ubiquitous brown-haired himbos. Harold is the resident chanter/handyman, and this translates into having the majority of your time engaged in the mundane busywork of delivering things or messages from one person to another, also known as the dreaded fetch quest. And here's a sample of the mundane work Harold is sent to do. Deliver messages, deliver packages, clean graffiti off a wall, clean the filtration system multiple times. I'm kind of perplexed how they could take such an interesting premise, present it in such a novel way, and then waste that potential by making you grind your time away on mundane fetch quests. Transportation is a big deal, and the characters seem to talk about it all the time. They use tubes to get around everywhere, and the tube system, as well as a lot of other things in their lives, is owned by a corporation, Allwater. Travel between locations is accomplished by riding these tubes. The actual travelling looks more like those crazy water slides where the bottom suddenly drops out, but it's combined with a nerve-wracking moment where you're not sure if you're going to drown as water fills up the tube. It has to be quite possibly the worst form of transportation I've ever seen. Beyond the stress of feeling like you could drown every time you take it, you're surely going to arrive at your destination soaking wet. But perhaps the least forgivable part of it all is the repetition. By the 50th time I've watched the same animation and heard the recycled corporate catchphrases, instead of marveling at the quirky novelty of this transportation system, I felt like my precious time and I were like turds being flushed away down a toilet. The lack of a fast travel system has me really perplexed. If you've watched some of my other videos, I stress the importance of games respecting the player's time. By contrast, Harold Halibut seems to revel in squandering it, and I can't quite tell why. There is an argument to be made that quick travel shortcuts too much of the game experience, thus ruining the immersion. It's why some players choose to never use quick travel, even if it's available. But that's more of an argument that works well for large, deeply diverse and target-rich open-world games like Red Dead Redemption, where getting from A to B is half the fun. You might discover new locations, meet a new fascinating quest giver, or work on collecting more bear pelts. In this game though, having to mournfully plod from one place to another adds precisely nothing, except many trivial, wasted hours of your life. And then let's talk about the parts that are interactive. There's this one sequence where you have to remove the screws from a panel. It involves moving the screwdriver around and clicking on the screw. It's not even remotely challenging, and I don't think it's supposed to be. It barely qualifies as interactive, so why bother? It's the kind of puzzle I'd give to a toddler to test if their barely formed brains are receiving and processing rudimentary input. We're talking on the magnitude of square peg in square hole level of taxation here. On top of the boredom of being a go-between, the game itself feels dull and dry. The corridors are static, lifeless. Music and other sound effects are sparse. NPCs are few and far between. The whole place feels barely lived in. And this is exacerbated by the fact there's not a lot to see or do in any of the locations. Interactions are extremely limited. You can't push or pull or take things. There's no looking at objects to glean more information or details. The novelty quickly wears thin, and the tedium of repetition hits hard. But Zen Button Masher, you're missing the point. It's supposed to be a walking simulator, not a puzzle-ridden adventure game. Oh, I know. Go and play Firewatch by Superdev's Campo Santo. There's a lot of walking around in that too, but the environments are a joy just to walk through, and the repetition is not terminally sleep-inducing. In terms of storytelling, Harold Halibut moves at a glacial pace. The game seems utterly content to spend time putting Harold to bed every day, instead of advancing the plot. It also over-relies on the use of immersion-breaking montages to advance the plot. Now, don't get me wrong, I love a good montage as much as the next guy.
That's called a montage. Girl, we want a montage.
But if you repeatedly use them, then they're more of a crutch in place of actual exposition techniques, like good dialogue, or maybe some environmental cues. Hell, I'd even take a good flashback scene. Conversations are another sore point. Meandering dialogue seem to dead end after running headfirst into sheer banality. Characters seem to be just as bored to talk to you as you are to listen to them. There's very little joy, expression, or life. At some point I just stopped talking to peripheral NPCs, as it didn't seem to accomplish anything beyond wasting my time. Often there's nothing in the way of character development, no plot movement or expansion of background stories. I'd compare it to talking about the weather, the kind of mundane shite that makes up about 90% of actual daily conversations in real life, because people feel the need to flap their cake holes, but actually have nothing to say. You know, the kind of thing you play video games to escape from. At one point, a character asks you to go for help, but the quest runs into a dead end when the character you're asking for help from says they can't help. So you return to the original quest giver, at which point they tell you they actually figured it out without your help, and forgot to let you know.
Bad news. Rafi couldn't help.
Good news. I got it working.
How?
Yeah, typical right after you left. Sorry, I forgot to message you. I got distracted verifying part 1 of my double checklist.
I was shocked at the degree of unadulterated rage that suddenly generated within me. I kept expecting the whole thing to devolve into a pointed joke. There had to be some reason for all this effort, for all this hard work, other than as an elaborate illustration of what ennui means. I thought I might be completely missing the point. Maybe they were trying to emphasize how banal and entirely pointless Harold's life is by making you live it through Harold's perspective. Perhaps they were using boredom as a literary device to help us empathize with the meaningless vacuum of Harold's existence. I'm still not entirely convinced that they're not doing this, but I urge you to think carefully whether you really want to play an extended reflection on what it means to be stuck in a hopeless existence. I'd say that this whole thing might have been much better as a feature-length animated movie instead of a game. Which leads me to posit philosophical questions like, what is a game? What is interactivity? And what is the point of it? What does it add to or subtract from an experience? At what point on the continuum does a game become a movie and vice versa? Oh, I'm not actually going to answer any of those questions. I'll just leave them hanging like deeply meaningful Christmas tree ornaments. In an interview with the creators, they addressed this very topic of making a video game instead of a movie, saying, quote, "The interactivity is what enables us to make a much more empathic connection to the story. You decide who to talk to and where to go next. Except you don't, as it's an on-the-rails narrative with no branches." I kept waiting for things to improve, the optimist in me expecting a revelation around the corner that would make it all make sense, lend the missing reason to the pointless monotony. After all, there's even a bloody brief musical interlude where Harold powerfully belts out a song whose basic point is that there must be more to his life than this dead-end job. You know, the same dead-end job you've paid good money to experience.
Isn't there more to life? I clean and I fix till my legs feel like bricks.
But even after an exciting reveal, where the plot is thickened, and the pace finally seems to be moving with some momentum, you're tasked instead with moving boxes downstairs. That's an actual chore in real life, and it doesn't get any more exciting because it's in a video game. The boxes are made out of clay, and for some reason, they turned it into pseudo-Tetris. The monotony of walking around the Fedora is briefly relieved in a later chapter where Harold gets to leave the ship to explore an alien cave with an actual alien named Wiyu, who looks not unlike a tortilla chip muppet in leopard print camo. This is an actual breath of fresh air. Freed from the metallic confines and his monotonous day job, Harold opens up. He asks interesting questions, gets into somewhat fascinating philosophical and epistemological debates with his alien companion, who shares a lot of qualities with Harold, and speaks with a refreshing naivety that at times drops off unexpectedly into astonishing depth. But the drudgery soon returns, and it's not long before the residents of the Fedora are yelling at Harold to get him to carry out their chores. Look, I hate vomiting haterade all over someone else's creative output, especially when it's evident that so much love and effort was spent to realize this vision. The character models and sets are good, the animations and voice acting are decent. It's wholesome and charming with a kind of naivety that is endearing for a little while. Harold does undergo a transformative arc, and there are fleeting moments of unexpected beauty and depth amidst the dullness and boredom. But any goodwill generated by these positives is unfortunately outweighed by the hours you'll spend traipsing slowly back and forth between mind-numbing fetch quests. Contrary to what the creators suggested, I think that with some judicious edits, tightening up of the dialogue and script, Harold Halibut would have been better as a claymation movie.